Good afternoon and welcome to today's presentation, Marijuana, the Legal Landscape Today and Tomorrow. The information presented by the expert is not to be used as legal advice and does not indicate a working relationship with the expert. All materials obtained from this presentation are merely for educational purposes and should not be used in a court of law since the expert's consent, i.e. a business relationship where she or he is hired for your particular case. In today's webinar, Don will discuss legal issues of marijuana growth, opportunities for attorneys in marijuana growth, what is marijuana, current landscape, summation, the marijuana industry, IRS issues, legal issues, monitoring marijuana issues, and in marijuana growth. To give you a little background about our presenter, Donald Mazzella is the COO and Editorial Director of Information Strategies Incorporated. He is a longtime board member and past treasurer of the Compassionate Care Foundation of New Jersey, a medical marijuana nonprofit dispensary. A national known speaker, he has appeared on television and radio programs as well as quoted in such publications as the Wall Street Journal. For the past 20 years, he has been a TASA expert on printing, publishing, and trademarks. Attendees who require a passcode, the word for today is marijuana. During the Q&A session, we ask that you enter this passcode into the Q&A widget for CLE reporting purposes. The Q&A is located to the left of your screen. Please remember that if you're applying for CLE credit, you must log onto your computer as yourself and stay for the full 60 minutes. You're also required to complete the survey at the end of the program. Please note that CLE credit cannot be given to those watching together on a single computer. Tomorrow morning, we will send out an email with a link to the archive recording of the webinar. The slides can be downloaded from the resource list at the widget at the bottom of your screen. Thank you all for attending today. And Don, the presentation is now turned over to you.
Thank you, Rochelle, and welcome. Marijuana and the law. Well, you know, it's an interesting thing. If you and I had this conversation 10 years ago, it would be a much different story and would be a much clearer story. The main message I'm going to give you today is that marijuana and the legal profession are on a roller coaster because, for one thing, we have the federal government saying that it's outlawed, and we have various state governments saying we welcome it. We're going to go into details, but I wanted to start this talk to provide participants with a better understanding of medical and recreational uses, legal facilitations, restraints, and applicable laws. You can all read the rest of that, but the main thing I'm hoping at the end of this thing is you'll have a better understanding of the complex issues focusing today. Although it is still under federal law, and despite the potential for legal action on the federal level, currently there are many initiatives by private and government leaders to exploit marijuana for gain. And quite frankly, it's going to be a major industry. Most people believe that within the next 2 years, it will be a $20 billion industry. Some people argue that it's even that now if you factor in the illegal side. We're going to today focus on the legal side. But again, the first thing you have to keep in mind, under federal law, marijuana usage in any form is a criminal act. Ironically, you can plant and raise marijuana, but that's all you can do. You can't transport it under federal law. You certainly can't sell it. And the argument is you certainly can't smoke it or use it privately. But the main point to keep in mind is legally it is still, under federal law you can grow it, but that's all you can do. And that's an important point. that you must keep in mind in all of this the discussions. The federal law permits the growing of it. What you do with it afterwards is where the federal and states differ. Now, right now, there are 26 states that permit marijuana usage in some form. They go from full recreational use, Oregon, Colorado, and California, all the way to the other spectrum where like New Jersey and New Mexico, it's only prescribed for municipal purposes and must be given under doctor's prescription. And in between, there are a great variety of state laws. The difference is that these state laws contradict the federal law. We've been living under a very uneasy truce, which was upended between the federal government under the Obama administration and the states. However, Attorney General Sessions has shaken up the industry, but not to the extent that he thought, by saying he feels that the law should be enforced and tightened. Just to give you an example, you can rest assured that he just nominated 9 new attorney generals. And one of the questions for the various states, as many as 16 actually, but of those you could rest assured he asked them how they felt on the strict enforcement of the federal laws. And also there has been a congressional ban on the use of funds to enforce the laws. But that amendment is about to be to expire because it was not reauthorized in the latest budget agreement, and people are working to try to get that reorganized. But the point you should keep in mind is there are no constraints starting next week of federal officials using funds to affect marijuana usage, sales, etc. in the states. We'll get back to that in a little bit. I'm laughing because as most of the people here listening are attorneys, this contradiction leads to great many opportunities for attorneys to represent individuals and entities in the marijuana industry. And we're going to go into that as well. Perhaps no weed has spurred more controversy in the United States as the 900-plus varieties of a plant. I'd like to stop here and point out to you that there are, when I started, they said there were 600. The latest number I was given was 900. But different strands of marijuana strains affect different parts of the body, different illnesses, etc. And this is an important point because there's no facility in the United States that just offers one brand. Most offer up to 14 or 15, and in some cases 30 different brands. Interestingly enough, there's going to be a great land rush to copyright the various brand names for the various strains. Different strains affect different parts of the body. For instance, there are strains that reduce tremors. There are strains that reduce blackouts. There are strains that help younger people. They're being developed. The problem has been there are no scientific studies outside of those being done or have been done in Israel and in France, which are the two hotbeds of marijuana research right at the moment. There's very little research being done in the United States. some of that research is now beginning to start, thanks to one of the last acts of the Obama administration. And also on the veterans hospital, they are also starting to do research. But for many people, for many doctors, the problem is what strains to recommend, how to recommend it. Should it be smoked? Should it be in a candy? How should it be in a cookie, etc.? All of these things are still up for grabs because there are no scientific studies to show what is the proper amount. And let me go sideways for 1 minute to explain an important fact. When you smoke marijuana, you're only receiving 10 to 20% of the efficacy of the marijuana strain. If you put it, extract it and put it in a cookie, etc., you're increasing it to 40 or 50%. This is an important consideration, and it's why there's also, in states like Colorado, there's a wide variety of products. And again, from the legal point of view, how do you trademark these products? How do you demonstrate that these products are have the ability to be patented, etc.? All of these issues are going to come to the forefront in the next 3 or 4 years. I'm told that there are already 1 or 2 groups putting together patent applications for key usage of marijuana for certain mental and physical ailments. But again, to emphasize this point, with so many strains of marijuana, with so many different uses for it, the industry itself does not have standards, and it's going to be a wide open frontier when and if, at the federal level, marijuana is legalized. The other ironic part is when I first got on the marijuana board in New Jersey, marijuana was a pariah. It was very difficult to find a township that would permit us to build our dispensary. It was also the case, by the way, in Colorado and other places. And one of the key things that the lawyers should remember about it is marijuana is still very much a local phenomenon. One town may permit a marijuana shop, the town right over may not. Some towns say you can't have a marijuana shop within a quarter mile of a school. All of these things are working themselves out, and all of them demand legal advice. And it's why that, according to some industry experts, it's expected that the legal bills for marijuana-related will triple in 2018 and double again in 2019. In every instance we've seen across the country, legal bills have represented between 10 and 15% of the cost of doing business the first 2 years. The ironic part is billions of dollars are expended each year dealing with the illegal marijuana trade. And just in today's paper, a former major league player was just caught with a large supply of marijuana and other drugs. But the point is marijuana by and of itself a criminal endeavor? According to some experts, 1 in 7 inmates in prisons today are there somehow related to marijuana and or other drugs. Not the hard drugs like cocaine, but marijuana is considered a soft drug, whereas cocaine and its like are considered hard drugs. but nonetheless, possession of it is still in many states, and the idea of selling it, both of these things are considered criminal acts. Oftentimes, the police will ignore the user, but will go after the seller. But the point to keep in mind is that policing it is a $1 billion plus, much more. But more importantly, people need to remember that there are a lot of people invested in the criminal activities on the law enforcement side, the police, the lawyers, the judges, etc. There is a system. If you take it out, as here in New Jersey, where they want to legalize recreational marijuana usage, it's expected that the cost to various government agencies will be reduced by 40%. Well, that money is coming out from someplace, and there are people whose livelihoods do depend on the criminal court system. But please keep in mind, illegal marijuana does not go away, as Colorado has found out, and other states are finding out, does not go away when you legalize marijuana in the sales system. However, why is that? Because pricing, because of location. Very few shops in Colorado are located in high crime areas, like with urban high crime. So you still need to get the product there, and there's still a place for illegal. So please keep that in mind. Law enforcement people realize that it may ease their burden perhaps in suburbia, but it will not change much within the inner cities and high crime areas. You know, we're under tremendous pressure here in the United States by two groups that feel marijuana should be legalized, providing people with an alternative to what individuals have often called a harmless drug addiction, and others who feel that marijuana may alleviate the opioid epidemic that is facing America. Estimates are that 55% of Americans take some form of opiate on a regular basis. Unfortunately, we have no scientific research here in the United States. We do have some in Israel and in France, which appear to point that way, but no one has yet found a causal relationship between increasing one legalized marijuana and reducing the other, illegal opiates or opiate usage. Unfortunately, it's going to take 2 or 3 years for these studies to be done. When the FDA and Congress loosen the restrictions on such research, which at the moment is not being done. But the point to keep in mind is there's heavy trend towards legalizing recreational marijuana. If you believe the surveys, it's gone from less than 25% 5 years ago to a majority today. However, there are still strong pockets of resistance to it, particularly in the states won by President Trump in the last election. In fact, if you looked at the map of the United States, where the recreational is to where the president won election, there's a high congruency. And interestingly enough, if you break it down into counties which he won and the usage, there's even a higher congruency. So please keep that in mind. To sum up, because I'd like to at this point, is that there's very little research. There is strong push by many people who feel that recreational will alleviate some problems, particularly the opiate epidemic and our the inmates in our nation's jails. It also, they think, reduce the prices of marijuana, both on the illegal and legal market. And most important, there are many people, myself included, that do believe that marijuana does have a positive effect on users with ailments. To give you some examples, relief of pain, ease of end-of-life processes, various types of epileptic seizures. All of these things have shown to be the case when the correct brand, the correct strain of marijuana is used. So you can't just go out on the market on the street and say, I want marijuana, and think that it'll be effective. Here in New Jersey, in my dispensary, we offer 15 different types of marijuana strains, each of which has a different effect on a different ailment for our patients. And by the way, that is the other difference. We view our patients as patients. They are not users. They are not people who are there for a high. They're there because marijuana provides relief, some temporary, albeit, but often long-lasting, to their afflictions. And they do get referred by doctors. In New Jersey, and I will only talk to them for 1 minute, you can only get marijuana by first going to a doctor and getting a prescription from him or her and signing up in a registry and then going to a location. And once you sign with one doctor, you cannot go to other doctors to get it. I mean, we're the strictest. And then we go all the way over to the other side, which is Colorado, which you can, as long as you prove are of age, and I always forget whether it's 18 or 21. I'm fairly certain it's 21. You can buy anything you want. But the problem is, if you have an ailment, there's very little research out there that says this particular strain will help you with this. There is research out there, and I've got a couple of websites for you. But the main point you need to remember is you need to find the right marijuana to do the job, which is to alleviate your pain. If you wanted to other things in other states, that's where the branding comes in. And that's where a lot of litigation will occur over the next 2 years as people attempt to develop the national and international brands. By the December of this year, it's expected that more than half of all Americans will be able to purchase marijuana, at the very least for a medical condition, but oftentimes for recreational use. Think about it. That's a potential audience of almost 200 million people. And with the purchase of the usage of it in some form or another, you're opening a multitude of Pandora's box on issues like driving. Should you be driving? And if you are you responsible? Applying for a job. We just had a case here yesterday where a company is being sued because the applicant had a medical prescribed marijuana, and they rejected him because he failed a drug test. That is another area that is going to be widely contested over the next few years. We'll talk about it later on. But and again, under all of this, we have to remember that all of these state laws directly contradict federal law, which is as clear as anything. You cannot transport, sell marijuana in any form, and you certainly can't cross state lines. Therefore, marijuana today is very much a state-constricted world. But as Colorado has found out, what happens when someone from a neighboring state comes across the river, and this is no requirement of residency, buys marijuana and then goes across? As one Oklahoma police chief said, if I wanted to make my quota of tickets, all I had to do was just set up a post along the highway with Colorado and just nail them one at a time. That's, again, the contradiction that makes marijuana today such a hot issue, and one that is going to affect us all for the next few years. Interesting. On that level, my next slide talks about State Bar Association. All of them are handling it different, in some cases not handling it at all. But every state bar association has set up in one form or another committees to look at this problem, because our dispensaries, legal entities entitled to representation. In some states they're told no. In other states they're told yes, you can. And oftentimes it's a case-by-case basis and a law firm by law firm basis. I know of one instance in a neighboring state where the dispensary went for almost 2 months trying to find legal representation. And then the other part of it is, the interesting part is, how do federal agencies handle disputes involving essentially illegal operations, like a dispensary, involving employment laws, discrimination, hazardous materials, etc. Again, it's a wild frontier out there. It's one that's going to need the rule of law, but at the moment suffers from many contradictions. Then you go, the next step is, what do you do with all the money? You can't buy marijuana with a credit card. It must be all cash. And what are the people who have a dispensary? What do they do with their cash? Well, this is no exaggeration. They're putting it under the mattress. A $20 billion industry is generating awful cash, but we've got to find ways of getting it into the banking system. But, $20 billion is an awful tempting target for politicians. And the other thing you have to keep in mind is that politicians want to tax this new world, and hence one of the main reasons why they're permitting it. In Colorado, in fact, the money they're earning from it was so far above their expectations, which the original purpose that they were going to devote is to the school system. Trouble is, they can't pour enough money that they make into the school system, and they have no way of. And under the law, they were supposed to return it to the patrons, but since there were no there's not a paper trail, they don't know what to do with the money. They'll find a way to spend it, they being politicians, but in the end, it's a problem that state officials don't view as a problem, but others may. Because if you're taxing it, you're taking it out of the economic system and you're devoting it to government. I'm going to stop here. It's the midpoint, and even though I haven't reached the that point, if there's any questions. Rochelle, are you there?
Yes. If all the attendees can enter in the passcode for today, which is marijuana, and any questions that you have for Don, you can enter those in a Q&A widget also. Our first question, if different strains have different medical effects, does that mean the active ingredient is something other than or addition to THC?
Well, it's a great question, and I wish I could give you an informed answer, but the different combination of the two active ingredients is what makes them effective. Beyond that point, they can email me afterwards, and I'll find the correct answer. But the main answer is it is the combination of the two.
Next question, why is the maximum utilization of the plant only 40 to 50% with edibles? Is it ever 100%?
Again, that's a question dealing with how you prepare it, etc. But I'm told by the experts that they can get it up to 80%, but no food really or plant ever really gives you 100%. But the answer I've been told is that it depends how much you want to devote to the process of rendering it that improves it. I've been told that 40 to 50% is what people aim for, and sometimes get higher. And the various manufacturers talk about this and how it's a trade-off between cost and efficacy.
Next question, what is your opinion on the government spending money to prosecute individuals for using, selling marijuana, nonviolent crimes, versus funding programs to conduct further medical research to assist individuals and their medical needs?
Could you repeat the question, Rochelle? I'm sorry. It's a complicated. Let me see if I can rephrase it. Are you saying should the government devote it more to research than to prosecution?
Yes. I'll read the question again. What is your opinion on the government spending money to prosecute individuals for using, selling marijuana, which are nonviolent crimes, versus funding programs to conduct further medical research to assist individuals in their medical needs?
Well, we would all like the latter, but unfortunately, it's up to the NIH and the various groups to fund the money. But remember, unless you get a special permit, you cannot, in the United States, do fundamental research in marijuana. The restrictions have been loosened over the last 2 years, but until Congress acts on various bills that are pending to really loosen it, it'll be very difficult to do it. And should they perhaps lessen on prosecution and go? Probably yes. But until Congress says differently, it's very difficult for the NIH or anybody else to do anything more than what they are doing.
And our last question for this section, is marijuana legal in Israel and in France? And would the statistics from those countries be valid in the U.S.? If not, why not?
Great question. And again, in Israel, it is legal to do research in marijuana, to do research in marijuana. The laws are much looser about the usage of marijuana. In France, the laws are stricter than in Israel, but are still relatively lax. And there's an awful lot of research that has been permitted under the guise of finding out the real effects and the real reasons behind marijuana. Would they be applicable in the United States? Probably, if Congress permitted it, but until they do, I think we have to have. I think we have to have uniformity in the rules, which we don't have at the moment. In France and in Israel, there's a uniformity of rules and a general understanding between the government and the people about the usage and the scientists. We don't have that consensus yet in the United States.
Thank you, Don. You can continue with the presentation.
Okay, I'm going to go back to my, if I can go back to my presentations. We went all the way to summation. I don't want to do that yet. Well, I'm going to go right on from here and come back to the where most law firms have focused are the providers to dispensaries. Remember, there's a profound difference between growing it and selling it and providing the tools to grow it and to use it. And right now, a majority of the investments being made are being made in the companies that provide the tools, the hydroponics, the seeds, etc., of marijuana, the various retorts and devices to extract the key ingredients of marijuana. These are all things that have attracted investment. In the states of Colorado, Oregon, and California, where there's full recreation, the battles are on to fully integrate the operation, to buy the retail outlets, to create brands, to do all of the things to create a unified selling environment. In other states like New York, New Jersey, etc., where there are stricter reforms, in anticipation of loosening of these rules, investment companies, individuals are all buying up or investing in the existing nonprofit entities, which were how these states originally set it up. In New Jersey, there are just 6 nonprofits. We are all waiting for the new governor to come up with a plan for legalizing recreational use. But in states like New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, they've all moved a step further beyond us and developing ways for people to invest. But right now, the majority of the investments and the majority of the legal work has been in working with the industry providers. Just to give you an example, the 2 marijuana shows in New York City have each grown from one floor of a hotel to the Jacob Javits Center over the last 4 years. and they all have become big shows for the industry. Interesting enough, just as an aside, under the federal law, armored cars cannot, companies like Brinks cannot provide transportation protection for funding, so that dispensaries across the nation still have a difficult time getting protection as they move their funds. That is expected to change soon. On the legal side, attorneys are developing practices around advising various applicants for these licenses in the various states. To give you an example, of 750 attendees at a New Jersey event a couple of weeks ago, 330 were attorneys, because the legal side of marijuana's dispensing and growing will be tough and litigious over the next 3 years, because individuals need to apply for state licenses, need to apply to local governments to anchor their establishments, and then all the various other legal necessities. As I said earlier, it's expected to triple that the investment in legal fees over the next 2 years. Lawyers are needed, and it's why I think we're having this conversation. It's fully expected that 15 to 20% of the investment monies over the next 2 years will be devoted to legal expenses. That's besides the money needed for the various people that will act as consultants to state and local governments, getting the licenses, getting the approvals, etc. I'm sitting here amazed at how much I saw recently expended in another state on legal fees for the obtaining of one license. The number astonished me, because it ran close to $1 million. And you might argue, gee, that sounds like a lot. But the necessity of running all the I's and the T's in any of these endeavors is doubled, because don't forget, a state licensed dispensary is illegal under federal law. So it's important to keep that in mind. And if you're planning to extend your practice into this area, it's really necessary to see where your state bar association is on it, because I have heard of cases of attorneys taking on marijuana establishments only to discover that their state bar has expressly forbidden or frowned upon it. It's an extremely difficult tightrope people are facing. Is it lucrative? Absolutely, because there aren't that many out there. There may be a lot more over the next couple of years, judging by what happened in New Jersey. But the important thing to remember is that there are a tremendous number of legal issues that need to be resolved. The number one, the state versus the federal government laws. 2, what is the standing of establishments that sell or raise marijuana in terms of legal disputes? there are issues, labor issues that are coming up. There are safety issues. There's a recent case involving the fact was there enough protection given to workers in a particular dispensary when that worker was shot by a would-be robber. I should stop here and say the surprising part, and this came up last week at a meeting I had, law enforcement officers predict, based on the early numbers, there have been less robberies of marijuana facilities than they expected. When compared to robberies of other gas stations, etc., ironically, it's still a low number. Are there break-ins, probably of owners, etc.? Probably yes. But are they reported? No, because there are income tax issues involved. And that's the other thing. Don't forget, marijuana is an all-cash business at this point. It's very difficult. The IRS is extremely thorough in its investigation of all returns submitted by dispensaries and others involved. The ironic part, don't forget, I call it ironic, is the government takes 30% of whatever cash a marijuana crop receives. Yes, you're laughing here and saying, but illegally they're not supposed to sell it. But people report it, and but they can only deduct the expenses around the growing of it. They can't deduct the expenses for selling it or any transporting it or anything else. There are accounting firms in Colorado who have been in this business for 4 or 5 years, and they report that it's an extremely interesting thing working with the IRS in that respect. The other thing to keep in mind is do the dispensaries adhere to federal labor laws, and do they pay FICA, etc.? There have been cases. I should stop here because I want to make a point. Make no mistake, marijuana sales in the United States are extremely lucrative. A recent study that I saw found that of the 90% of the failures, when they are very few, relatively speaking, very few, in Colorado and in Oregon, examined by this professor, they were failed because of malfeasance, either on the part of the owner and or the employees. Raising and selling marijuana by itself is a very profitable business, and that's why it is growing like it is, why it has an industry grouping as it does, and why, ironically, a major expense outside of the actual growing is the legal expenses. The uncertainty is what's really making these firms sit up and take notice. They try. I was at a recent meeting of a group of owners in a state, and I listened to their complaints. What were they? Number one was getting the license. Number two, understanding the legal laws, and number three, finding the legal representation that would enable them to feel comfortable that they're doing everything they could do outside of violating federal law to maintain their business. But make no mistake, in California, in Colorado, and the other states forming. Marijuana is growing as a business. It's one where the industry believes Attorney General Sessions will not do anything further about the recreational side. He has come out and said that he's all for expanding the medical side of it. He is against, he is worried about the recreational side. What is going to happen over the next few years is great fodder for the legal profession, because the conflict between state and federal is going to be there for at least another 2 years. And whenever you have that, there's always opportunities for attorneys to play an important role. Before Congress, are a number of bills on the growing and selling of marijuana. Industry, I was down in Washington a couple of weeks ago, and they stand almost no chance of passage in this Congress. Perhaps if the Democrats gain control of the House, there may be, but right now there isn't. Nor are there any hope of providing greater legal protections in the courts. What is interesting is because dispensaries, etc., are illegal, they have no standing in court. And the biggest thing we've seen are people stiffing them for various issues in terms of purchases. Since electricity is a major part of indoor selling, that has been the single greatest area where stores have simply refused to pay the bill, and has left the electrical companies with little recourse. Their recourse, of course, is to shut off the electrical, but the answer there is they simply move locations, set up another company, and go from there. It's an interesting time. If you ship something across state line from to a dispensary, you better hope they pay, because you have very little recourse. That's a very interesting area. Well, they have, and interesting enough, on the other side, dispensaries have no bankruptcy protection because they're not legal entities. The bar associations have to deal with it. Federal agencies are finding it difficult, if not impossible, to make decisions on this, on issues affecting them. In many cases, they punt the issue. And banks are forbidden, though there was a crack forbidden for the use of marijuana monies, but there was a crack because a credit union in Colorado has just been given the permission to not to handle dispensaries, but everything else associated with marijuana growing. I want to give you these two sites. The National Association of State Legislature has what I think is the best site for keeping abreast of this. They have a whole section devoted to it. They have the latest information, the most in-depth, and they explain it best. Their library, their state legislature, there they are. I'm not going to read them out, but you can see the marijuana deep dive ASPX and cannabis.svg. Don't ask me what they mean, but they're two excellent sites, and I myself use them to keep abreast of things. Ongoing legislative battles, they have the legal opportunities. I'm rushing through to finish it to give you time. Representing establishments in local and state government, employer and employee disputes are becoming more and more an issue. contract squabbles which cannot be settled in court. Arbitration is going to mutual arbitration is going to be the venue of choice and tribunal of choice. Business operation disputes, consumer actions. That's going to be a very big area. We're already starting to see the first of the consumer suing. Product safety standards and defense, establishment, personal industry, injury, and estate planning. By the way, how do you pass it on? Personal injury and integrity, estate, a trademark. That is going to be a very big issue over the next couple of years as people try to establish their right to various brands and formulations. And as I say, arbitration will be a venue, a tribunal of choice. Who loses in marijuana growth? Criminal attorneys, police departments. They no longer get all the monies. So-called sin vice, the cigarettes, gambling, liquor. The money that's sucked out from for marijuana purchase, they have to come from someplace. Cigarettes, gambling, liquor, though, again, liquor does not seem to be as affected as much. What seems, depending on who you talk to, some of the basics are taken in other disposable income, movies, etc. But again, those are going to be losers. Finishing up, marijuana will be a $20 billion industry. Legal advice will double or triple in the next 2 years. Recreational usage will skyrocket. It did in Colorado over the next couple of years, and then we'll level off. But I haven't even talked about liability and insurance issues will surface. I believe that there will be some form of federal pushback. A high tax burden will appear. The states will tax it to death, and uncertainty will rise inside the industry. Right now, it's on a roll, and it thinks it's unstoppable. I'll stop here, and if you have any questions, Rochelle, go ahead.
Yeah. If all the attendees can enter in the passcode for today, which is marijuana, and first question, can an employer refuse to hire in a legalized state if the applicant has a doctor's note?
Say that again. I'm sorry, Rochelle.
Sure. Can an employer refuse to hire in a legalized state if the applicant has a doctor's note?
Well, that's a question that's up for debate. And right now, no one can answer that. There's 2 or 3 cases where they're being sued, but and there's one case before the National Transportation Board because how can you have an engineer drive a train if they're on marijuana? But the answer is it's right in there. It's one of the issues I said that's going to be there, and I can't give you an answer because there is no answer right now. It's all in the courts.
Next question. With the regulations and laws being enacted on a state basis, does that make possession illegal on federal land such as parks or national landmarks?
On federal lands? That's a good question. Right now, the feds have chosen not in Colorado and now California and in Oregon. They've chosen not to enforce the laws, but in some states it is being enforced. It really depends on the national park, and marijuana use in national parks is prohibitive and should be enforced. It's not being enforced in those 3 states because the feds simply don't want to get into a contest with them, but it is being enforced in other states where it is not where it's not been legalized.
Thanks so much, Don. Any unanswered questions will go directly to Don, which he will be able to answer for you. In addition to being your best source for testifying consulting experts for the past 60 years, TASA also offers free interactive webinars, expert written articles, research reports on expert witnesses, including the Challenge History Report 2.0 and Expert Profile 360. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for attending, and most especially Don Mazzella for his time and effort in creating this presentation. If you would like to speak with Don, or if you would like to speak with a TASA representative regarding the case that you're currently working on, please contact TASA at 1-800-523-2319. One of my colleagues will be following up with you regarding your feedback on today's presentation. Thank you all for attending. This concludes our program for today.